The leading story is the father of the late Enoch Mbianzi has described his son as remarkable, saying he has many dreams and plans for the future, or rather had. Johannesburg City Power says its customers won't be affected by Eskom's load shedding over the weekend. Eskom is currently implementing stage 2 load shedding until Monday. Another leading story, China has criticized the United States for banning its citizens from entering America due to fears over coronavirus. Hello once again and welcome. This is the third hour of the agenda on this Saturday morning. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Desiree Chalke. Pro-European Union demonstrators have staged a march to bid farewell to the European Union with an anti-Brexit rally in candlelit vigils being held in Scotland. The UK has officially left the EU after 47 years of membership and more than 3 years after it voted to do so in a referendum. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has described the UK's departure from the EU as an astonishing moment of hope for the region. Most EU laws will continue to be in force, including the free movement of people until the end of December, by which time the UK aims to have reached a permanent free trade agreement with the EU.
And that's it. History is made. The United Kingdom finally out of the European Union after nearly half a century of membership. It's a symbolic moment and thousands of people gathered here on Friday night to celebrate. Jubilant scenes as arch-Brexiteer Nigel Farage took to the stage, and there was an enormous countdown to 11 p.m. local time. That's the exact moment where the UK left the EU. It's not to say that it's done forever. Many saying that actually Britain could one day rejoin. In the meantime, though, there is what's known as a transition period, 11 months of negotiation and wrangling over the details to see what future trade relationship Britain will get with the EU. During that time, most affairs will stay the same, and it's during that time that we'll find out exactly what Britain has in store for post-Brexit life. A number of people are dispersing behind me in Parliament Square, but no doubt the party will go on for many days for people who have fought for this moment for so long. Benji Haya, SABC News, London.
Oh, well, let's now bring in our correspondent Stuart Smith live from London for the latest. Stuart, a very good morning to you live from London. What's the mood like at the moment, having passed that 11 a.m. GMT time?
Yeah, well, the mood, as you might expect, is now morning after those huge celebrations. So for a lot of people, I'm sure it's sore throats and sore heads. As you can see from those pictures, it was a very exciting, very active party going on. And when that hit 11 p.m. GMT time, when the UK did finally leave the EU, there were huge roars from Parliament Square. That's not to forget, just across the River Thames, down on the south side, where the London Eye was, there was a vigil being held by pro-EU Remain supporters. Their party was a bit more of a quiet affair, a bit more melancholy. These people are quite upset, and some of them very angry that the UK is leaving. But either way, a very emotional night for whichever side you were on.
Just give us a sense of that pro-EU vigil. The attendance, was it substantial?
It wasn't as large as the pro-Brexit party, which is to be expected on a Friday night. Definitely a lot of people would rather be clubbing and partying, and that's what was going on at the pro-Brexit rally. A candlelight vigil, a bit more of a quiet affair, so a bit less busy, but definitely a very emotional place to be. And especially nice, I think, for people to be surrounded by others that held their own beliefs at a time which could be quite dark for many people, especially EU citizens who are very concerned about their future.
We've seen footage from the EU Commission where the British flag was being removed amongst the membership flags of the members of the EU. How did Britons react to this moment? They're obviously happy, as you're saying.
Yeah, well, not every Briton is happy that flags are being removed. Anyone that wanted the UK to stay in the EU is more likely to be rather sad about this. The EU is quite respectfully taking down the British flags from EU institutions over a period of 3 days. It's not one grand moment. They're trying to gradually fade out the UK's presence in the EU. But it is the case now that there is no UK presence in any of the EU institutions at all. Certainly, we talk about the big parties in London, the pro-Brexit party, the pro-Remain parties, and how high the emotions have been there. You've got to remember, a country with 66 million people, these represent a very small percentage. And to a lot of people, Friday evening would have been a normal night. We knew Brexit was happening. A lot of people have already moved on, and a lot of people just want this to be over, regardless of who they originally voted for.
In terms of politics, what does this mean for the government of Boris Johnson?
Well, he'll be keen to try and secure deals as quickly as possible. You've got to think the EU don't think it's even possible to arrange this deal in 11 months at all. And of course, it's actually less than 11 months. It's more like 8 months, because these things take time to be ratified through the EU institutions. So a deal with the EU is Mr. Johnson's number one priority, but very close is a deal with the US. A free trade deal with the US would be something he would really like to come home with.
So the parties continue, I suppose.
Yes, the parties probably will. It's definitely a case that vigils are certainly continuing over the next few weeks. It's now the weekend. Any excuse for a party is probably a good thing, especially amongst the pro-Brexit supporters. You've got to think they've been waiting 3.5 years for this. And throughout all of this process, it's been very controversial, very heated. And a lot of people, and you would see them at the protest yesterday, a lot of people really feel like democracy had been ignored over that period. And there was talks of traitors and sabotage, some very extreme, strong language towards the people that have fought against either leaving the EU or leaving the EU as quickly as it happened. So more parties, undoubtedly, and even those people that were not at the pro-Brexit celebrations in London, there'll be towns and cities across the UK where similar parties were being held. A very national affair.
Stuart, the significance of this moment is not lost on the world. Here in South Africa, we've heard our Minister of International Relations saying Brexit represents an opportunity for the continent. And just recently, the UK held a UK Africa conference where conversations were slanting towards bringing business towards the African continent. Is this conversation gaining momentum in the UK?
Yeah, I think it is. Over time, as soon as people realised that Brexit was something that was going to happen, people look to the future and they become a little bit more interested in what's going to happen next. And certainly by being removed from the EU's trading agreements with Africa, South Africa and the various blocs within Africa, the UK is free to make its own deals after the transition period. And Boris Johnson was at this UK African Investment Summit, and he did say that there are deals to be done in every country in Africa, and he's certainly very optimistic himself, and the rest of the government are as well. And I think at that African Trade Summit, there were a few $1 billion worth of deals done. It's something that definitely African countries are taking up, the offer of a new global Britain, which is free to make its own trade deals. This is something which definitely, if you're looking for a silver lining, is a silver lining.
So many global leaders have raised concerns about the rise of populism and the rise of nationalism. And Britain, for years, has been quite a melting pot of people from different countries coming in for commercial and economic reasons. And there is a concern that the continuation of the prosperity of these people's lives could be at risk with Brexit being official now. Is that the case?
Well, a good number that represents quite how global Britain was. 2.7 million EU citizens have applied for the either pre-settled or settled status. That's something that EU citizens living in Britain, who aren't British, will have to apply for if they wish to remain beyond the transition period after 2020. So indeed, it is a very popular place for EU citizens and citizens around the world to end up. Definitely, a lot of EU citizens are worried, that is for sure. It's not a simple process. It's not a reasonably cheap process either to get this settled and pre-settled status. And there is still uncertainty because although they can stay for now, no one yet knows what will be agreed with the EU after 2020. Definitely, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is keen to keep mentioning time and time again that we still are welcoming immigrants and foreigners to the country and that we want to remain a global country. But in reality, no one's too sure what the future arrangements will be. Australian system of an immigration points style system is one proposal. That's what the government would like. But whether that is what we end up with, we're not too sure.
Stuart Smith, thank you so much for talking to us this morning.